The chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with light, tall pillars rising high, banners of hundreds of species hanging from the walls, and the sound of voices crashing together like a storm, every delegate raising their words against one world, Earth. The humans stood in the center, a small group of envoys with pale faces, their eyes fixed forward while the sea of alien voices shouted accusations, words like arrogance, danger, chaos, untrustworthy, repeated again and again until it felt like they were being stabbed by 1,000 blades. One counselor shouted that humanity was too reckless, another claimed humans loved war, another accused them of upsetting the balance of peace, and soon the voices joined together like a single judgment. Calling for exile, the humans did not speak. They knew the vote was already decided. A great gong echoed through the chamber. The voice of the High Speaker rang across the hall, slow and heavy, announcing that the council had decided by majority that Earth was no longer welcome, no longer trusted, no longer protected. Trade lines would be closed, alliances cut, and humanity would be left alone in the cold of space. The words fell like stones. The chamber shook with laughter. Some delegates slammed their hands on the tables in mocking cheers. Some whispered that humans would not last 10 years without the council. Some even smiled cruelly, imagining the slow death of Earth as it starved and struggled without allies. The human envoy, a man with gray eyes, kept standing, his fists clenched at his side. He did not answer the insults. He did not beg for mercy. His silence made the room angrier, for they expected fear and pleas. Instead they saw stillness. His gaze swept across the chamber once, meeting eyes of those who condemned his world, and without a word, he turned and walked out. The other humans followed, the sound of alien laughter echoing behind them as the council closed its doors. Outside the chamber, silence fell like a heavy cloak. The human envoys walked together down the long glass corridors of the station. And though their faces were calm, deep inside a fire had been lit. They knew what this judgment meant. Earth would suffer, Earth would bleed. But Earth would also remember, and in that remembering, anger would not fade, it would grow. Back on Earth, the news spread quickly. The skies above cities glowed with the flicker of broadcast screens, showing the council's decision to billions. People watched in shock as alien leaders laughed at their fate. Some felt fear, wondering if the planet could survive without trade. Without resources from the stars, factories would fall silent, medicines would run short, ships would rust in dry docks. But beneath the fear came something stronger, a slow rising fury, a quiet unity that had not been seen in generations. In the streets, people gathered, some shouted in anger, others stood silent with tears. But when the images of laughing counselors played again and again, the silence turned into clenched fists, into eyes burning with determination. Humanity had been insulted before. Humanity had been underestimated many times in history. But this time was different. They had been cast aside completely, and the sting of humiliation would not be forgotten. World leaders met in hidden rooms, their voices low, their plans uncertain. But one thought grew in every mind. If the galaxy wanted Earth to die alone, then Earth would learn to live alone. If the galaxy wanted Earth to be weak, then Earth would become strong in its own way. No one said the word revenge, but it hung in the air like smoke, thick and heavy. Years passed in silence. The galaxy believed Earth was broken. No trade ships left its ports, no embassies opened, no diplomats were seen at the council again. Alien traders laughed that humans must be starving. Alien leaders declared that Earth was forgotten. But behind the veil of silence, Earth moved differently. Underground factories came alive. Mountains echoed with secret construction. Shipyards hidden beneath the oceans rumbled with the sound of engines never seen before. Humanity had taken the insult and turned it into fuel. Families raised children with stories not of defeat, but of exile, not of shame, but of survival. Every young man and woman grew with the memory of that day when the council laughed. Their parents' voices told them that one day humanity would rise again, that one day the stars would see Earth not as weak, but as something stronger than anyone could imagine. The wound became the spark, the exile became the fire. In the council's chamber, years later, no one spoke of Earth anymore. The laughter had faded, replaced by new disputes, new accusations between other species. To them, humanity was a closed story, a failed race left to wither. Yet somewhere beyond the stars, beyond their watch, the silence of Earth was shaping into something else, something heavier, something sharper, something dangerous. And though the galaxy thought the exile had ended the story of humankind, in truth, It had only written the first chapter, for behind Earth's silence, anger burned, and anger had begun to build into resolve, resolve into steel, and steel into destiny. The council did not know it yet. But the day would come when their laughter would be silenced, when the sound of engines would return, carrying not just ships, but the weight of a people who had been banished, and who now waited for the moment to return. The galaxy moved on quickly after the exile of Earth. The council chambers echoed with new arguments, new debates, and new punishments for other worlds. But no one spoke of humans anymore. For most alien leaders, Earth was a memory already buried, a story ended, a species left to fade in the shadows of isolation. They believed humans could not survive without the trade networks of the galaxy, without the flow of rare resources, medicines, and technology. They believed hunger and sickness would break the planet. They believed time itself would erase humanity. And so the council turned its eyes elsewhere while silence covered Earth. But silence did not mean death. Silence meant preparation. Beneath the ocean's vast domes lit up in secret, filled with the thunder of engines and the glow of molten steel. Deep under mountains, hidden factories worked day and night, guarded by men and women who swore their lives to secrecy. Far away in frozen wastelands, testing grounds echoed with the roars of machines never seen by alien eyes. Earth had been cut off. But humans had long learned how to survive with little. They had learned how to turn scarcity into invention. And they had learned how to fight with whatever they had. On the surface, cities looked quieter. Trade stations that once carried alien goods stood empty. Embassies were closed. But within homes and schools, something new was happening. Children grew up hearing the story of exile not as tragedy but as warning. They were told of the day when alien leaders mocked their people. They were shown the images of the council laughing at Earth, and they were taught that weakness had no place in the future. Young hands clenched into fists. Young eyes looked to the stars, not with hope but with hunger. The hunger to prove wrong those who believed humanity was finished. In space, old stations that once traded with alien merchants became strongholds, armed secretly, upgraded with technology once forbidden. Engineers worked for decades to crack codes, to build engines that could travel faster, to design weapons sharper and stronger than the galaxy had allowed. Scientists who once worked for peaceful exploration now gave their genius to the survival of their world. Doctors who once dreamed of cures now studied how to keep soldiers alive in war. Artists painted banners not of peace but of resolve. The exile had reshaped the very soul of humanity. The galaxy dismissed strange rumors, small patrols disappearing at the edge of human space, merchant ships reporting faint signals they did not recognize. Shadows moving between the stars. The council laughed it off, saying humans had become pirates at best, scavengers fighting over scraps. Yet the truth was far larger. Hidden fleets were slowly taking shape. Thousands of ships built piece by piece in silence. No great parades announced them. No messages declared them. Only the steady hum of engines whispered of what was to come. On Earth itself, the people endured years of sacrifice. Food was rationed. Resources were stretched. Families gave up comfort. But all accepted the pain as the cost of survival. No one complained. For every man and woman knew the truth. That one day the silence would break. One day humanity would step into the stars again. And when that day came, they would not return as beggars or traders. They would return as something far stronger. Every hardship became a brick in the wall of discipline. Every loss became fuel for determination. The council's spies tried to look into human space, but they found little. Messages intercepted were broken and misleading. Maps showed nothing but empty silence. Probes were destroyed, scouts vanished. So the council convinced itself there was nothing there. Yet in the dark halls of human command centers, deep under the earth, leaders sat around tables studying maps of the galaxy, their eyes burning with the knowledge that exile had given them one gift the council could never imagine, the gift of time. While the galaxy ignored them, humanity prepared. Decades passed. Generations grew up knowing nothing of alien friendship, only the memory of alien betrayal. Soldiers trained in secret academies. Pilots flew endless simulations of battles against fleets far larger than their own. Strategists studied every weakness of every alien species. Learning patterns, habits, and fears, they taught themselves patience, for they knew rushing would mean ruin, and so humanity waited, growing stronger each year, while the galaxy grew weaker in arrogance. One night in the great shipyards beneath the oceans, the first of the new warships came alive. Its engines roared like thunder, shaking the waters above. The engineers who stood on its decks felt pride that nearly brought them to tears. For this was not just a ship, it was a symbol, proof that exile had not broken Earth, proof that silence had been used to build something greater than the Council could ever imagine. The ship's black hull reflected no light, its weapons hidden but ready, and in its core pulsed a heart of human will. And so the years of silence, which the galaxy thought were years of weakness, were in truth the years of transformation. Earth was no longer the same world that had walked into the council chamber and listened to laughter. It was something harder, sharper, something forged in anger and patience. The galaxy did not see it yet, but soon it would, for the silence of Earth was ending, and what was rising in its place was not a broken world, but the beginning of an empire that end the far reaches of the galaxy, where trade lanes thinned and only quiet patrol routes stretched across the stars. Whispers began to spread. It started with small things, a merchant convoy failing to arrive at its port, a scout vessel going silent after reporting strange signals, a patrol ship vanishing without a trace. At first the Council dismissed these events, blaming pirates, rogue raiders, or even equipment failures. The galaxy was vast, and ships sometimes vanished into the dark, but soon the number of disappearances grew too many to ignore. Captains returned with stories of shadows in the void, massive outlines of ships that moved without broadcasting any identification. Some claimed they saw black hulls sliding silently past their sensors. Too large to be pirate vessels, too organized to be raiders, merchants spoke of signals, pulses of encrypted code, that echoed in the dark, strange and unrecognizable, but steady and strong. The Council laughed in their chambers, declaring such tales nonsense, mere fear of the unknown. Yet fear has a way of spreading faster than truth. In the border colonies nearest to human space, unease grew heavier. Villages woke at night to skies flashing with distant light, as if great engines were roaring silently across the void. Miners spoke of abandoned asteroids now crawling with strange construction, of debris fields moving against the flow of gravity, as though being pulled into formation. Still the Council ignored the warnings, but those who lived close to human borders remembered. They remembered the day Earth had been exiled. They remembered the cold silence that followed, and they began to wonder if silence was not death, but waiting. On Earth, the whispers of steel had already grown into thunder. Hidden shipyards no longer produced single vessels, but entire fleets, black warships with teeth of fire, carriers built to release wings of fighters, cruisers armed with weapons that gleamed with human design, weapons crafted in secrecy with decades of innovation. Each ship launched not with ceremony but with purpose, for the humans had no need to boast. Their only promise was that one day these ships would be seen by all. Commanders walked the decks of these ships with eyes hardened by years of training. They spoke little, but their voices carried the weight of discipline. Soldiers drilled endlessly. Pilots learned to fly through storms of fire. Engineers tested weapons again and again until every system was flawless. No one asked when the order would come, for all knew it would come. Exile had given them no choice. Survival demanded more than patience. Survival demanded strength. Still, Earth did not reveal itself. The leaders of humanity knew the galaxy was watching. They knew the Council still sent spies. They knew premature action would bring ruin. So they waited, allowing fear to spread in quiet ways, letting rumors feed themselves. Every disappearance of a Council ship was a thread pulled from the tapestry of their arrogance. Every whisper of shadows in the void was another seed of doubt. The Council dismissed it in public, but in private, unease crept into their meetings. One counselor from the border system stood in the chamber and demanded answers. He spoke of entire patrol fleets that had failed to return, of colonies whispering about human shadows, of coded signals pulsing in the void. But the high speaker silenced him, calling it fearmongering, calling it weakness. The chamber laughed again as they had laughed years before, but this time their laughter carried a different tone, thinner, less certain, for deep inside, some part of them remembered the eyes of the human envoy on the day of exile, silent, steady, promising something unspoken. Meanwhile, far from their laughter, a merchant convoy carrying rare minerals drifted across the stars, its escorts scanning lazily, confident no threat lingered. But then the darkness shifted. A massive shadow slipped from the void, sensors scrambled, alarms screamed. Before the escorts could raise weapons, beams of blinding light tore through their hulls, shields collapsed, engines died, and in minutes the convoy was gone, taken without a trace. A single message left floating in the wreckage. Not words, not threats, only a pulse of encrypted code repeating one phrase when decoded, Earth remembers. When this report reached the Council, they were shaken, but pride blinded them. They called it the work of rogue humans turned pirates. They insisted Earth could not possibly build such power in exile. But those in the outer colonies began to believe otherwise. They began to whisper that the humans had returned, not with pleas for mercy, but with steel forged in silence. Fear spread in taverns, in markets, in the dark corners of spaceports. Whispers that the Council's greatest mistake was not exiling Earth, but underestimating what exile would create. Back on Earth, leaders gathered in the great underground chambers where maps of the galaxy stretched across glowing tables. Their eyes followed the reports of fear spreading. Their lips tightened into thin smiles, for they knew their strategy was working. They would not reveal themselves fully yet, but every whisper, every rumor, every shadow, was another strike against the Council's confidence, and in war, fear was as powerful a weapon as any blade. In the training halls, young recruits repeated the same mantra whispered to them since birth, that exile was not the end but the beginning, that silence was not weakness but preparation, and that one day humanity would return not as outcasts, but as rulers. The sound of their voices echoed like drums, strong, unbroken, ready. And so the whispers of steel grew louder, until even the stars themselves seemed to carry the weight of engines moving in silence, fleets waiting in the shadows, and eyes watching from the dark. The galaxy believed Earth was gone, but the truth was now too close to ignore. Humanity was not broken, humanity was not forgotten, humanity was building, and soon the silence would be broken by the roar of war. The dawn of humanity's return came without warning, on a quiet council world far from the core but close to the borders of human exile space. The people of that world awoke to alarms in the night sky. Their orbital defenses had detected a massive object emerging from the void. At first they thought it was an asteroid, its dark shape sliding slowly out of the shadows. But then lights flickered across its hull, sharp, deliberate, glowing like the eyes of a predator. The scanners screamed with impossible readings. The object was not a rock. It was a ship, and not just any ship. It was something unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Council fleet stationed there scrambled. Dozens of cruisers and frigates moved into formation, their commanders confident that no rogue ship could challenge them. But when the warship of Earth came fully into view, their confidence cracked. It was larger than their cruisers, longer than their frigates, its hull black as night, shaped with angles that defied scanners. Every sensor pulse reflected back scrambled and broken. It was as if the ship refused to be measured. The Council commander ordered an attack. Beams of energy lit the void. Missiles streaked forward. But the human ship did not flinch. With a soundless roar in the vacuum of space, the black warship came alive. Weapons hidden in its hull slid open, releasing lances of light that carved through the Council fleet. Shields that had withstood decades of war collapsed in seconds. Ships broke apart like toys. Flames bursting in silence as they were torn apart. In less than an hour the fleet was gone. Nothing remained but wreckage drifting slowly across the void. The planet below stared in horror as their protectors vanished. Their sky filled with falling debris. Then the human ship transmitted a single message, not a demand, not a treaty, not even a name, only two words spoken in every known galactic tongue: Earth remembers. The message repeated again and again, echoing across every communication channel of the planet. Its people froze. Merchants in spaceports dropped their tools. Families in their homes watched the words appear across every screen. Soldiers on the ground felt their blood run cold. They remembered the stories of Earth's exile. They remembered the Council's laughter. And now they saw the return. The Council was shaken when news reached them. Many tried to dismiss it, calling it an accident, a lucky ambush, a trick. But the images of the destroyed fleet could not be denied. The wreckage showed wounds no pirate fleet could inflict. The technology was advanced, precise, merciless, and the message was undeniable. The humans had returned. Worse, they had returned stronger. The Council chambers grew heated with panic. Some councillors demanded an immediate strike against Earth. Others argued that humanity could not be confronted alone. Whispers spread through the chamber that perhaps exile had been the wrong choice. But pride silenced those whispers quickly. Meanwhile, in the outer colonies, a strange thing began to happen. Instead of fear, many oppressed worlds felt hope. They saw the power of the human warship and remembered their own suffering under the weight of the Council. To them, the humans did not appear as monsters. They appeared as rebels, as liberators, as a people who had been cast aside yet risen again. Whispers spread not of terror but of loyalty, the thought that perhaps standing with Earth could bring freedom. On Earth, the leaders of the hidden empire received the first reports of the Council's panic. Their faces did not show joy, only resolve. They had waited for this moment for decades. They had shown their teeth for the first time, and the galaxy now knew the truth. Humanity was not dead, not forgotten, not weak. The day of shadows was ending, and the day of reckoning was beginning. In their underground command halls, they studied maps of the galaxy, pointing to colonies, to trade routes, to fleets, their voices calm but their decisions sharp, every step planned with precision. In the shipyards beneath the oceans, more warships came alive, their black hulls rising from the waters like beasts from deep trenches. One after another, carriers, cruisers, destroyers, their engines lit with the fire of exile turned into vengeance. Crews marched onto their decks. Soldiers saluted banners bearing a single star, the Star of Earth, and with every ship launched, the silence of exile grew thinner, the storm of return grew stronger. On the Council world that had been attacked, the people lived in fear of another strike. But the human warship did not return to destroy them. Instead it vanished into the void as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind only memory. This act confused the Council. They expected Earth to strike like raiders, to destroy and loot. But the humans had left without claiming a prize. Their message was clear. It was not about conquest yet. It was about warning. It was about reminding the galaxy that humanity had been wronged, and that wrong would not be forgotten. The High Speaker stood in the Council chamber days later, his voice trembling as he declared humanity a threat to galactic peace. Fleets were ordered to prepare, spies were sent to search, diplomats whispered of alliances to counter Earth. But even as they spoke, unease filled the chamber. They knew deep inside that the humans had returned not as beggars but as predators, and predators did not strike without reason. Predators chose their time, their place, their prey. And far away, hidden in the shadows of the void, fleets of black warships gathered, their engines humming softly, their weapons waiting, their crews silent but ready. The galaxy did not yet understand. But Earth had chosen its path, exile had given them patience, betrayal had given them fury, and now their return would give them destiny. The Council had seen only one ship, but behind it, an empire of war was already awake across the galaxy. The story of the black warship spread faster than any official report. Merchants whispered it in spaceports, soldiers muttered it in barracks, miners told it over fires in the frozen outposts. Everyone had heard of the ship that tore through a Council fleet and left behind only two words: Earth remembers. The Council tried to control the story. They branded it as lies. They announced it as a pirate trick. They broadcast speeches of strength. But no words could erase the fear, for too many eyes had seen the wreckage. Too many ears had heard the message. The galaxy could feel it in its bones. Humanity had returned. In the border colonies, where the Council's hand was heavy and cruel, the whispers grew into something stronger. Many of those worlds had long suffered under unfair taxes, harsh laws, and soldiers who enforced peace with fists of iron. These people had no hope. They had cried for change for generations and been silenced each time. But now, when they heard the story of Earth's warship, something inside them shifted. They began to look at the stars with new eyes, thinking perhaps the humans could bring more than fear. Perhaps they could bring freedom. It began quietly. A mining colony on a barren world sent out a secret message, not to the Council, but into the void. It was a call not for trade, not for help, but for allegiance. They pledged loyalty to Earth if Earth would protect them. No Council record ever caught that message. But deep in the shadows, human intelligence officers received it. In hidden command rooms beneath Earth's oceans the message was read aloud. Silence filled the chamber. Then a single decision was made. The colony would not be ignored. Weeks later, the miners on that barren world awoke to the sound of thunder rolling across their skies. Black ships descended, sleek and vast, carrying banners marked with the Star of Earth. The people gathered in fear at first, believing perhaps they were about to be crushed like insects. But when the ships landed, human soldiers marched out not with chains but with supplies, food, medicine, tools. The miners fell silent, for this was not conquest. It was deliverance. They saw the steel of war in the humans' eyes, but also something else, a promise. The colony raised its flag the next morning, and beside it fluttered the banner of Earth. News of this spread like wildfire. In other colonies, people began to whisper not just of human power but of human protection. They told stories of black ships arriving with thunder and leaving with loyalty, of banners raised in the night, of council garrisons too afraid to fight back. One by one, oppressed worlds began to send their secret messages. One by one the black fleets answered. Humanity had not just returned with war, it had returned with an offer, an empire that did not begin with chains but with choice. The council tried to crush these rebellions. Fleets were sent to remind colonies of their place. But again and again the black warships appeared, striking fast, vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Council soldiers surrendered in fear. Some even deserted, whispering that they would rather serve under Earth's star than die for the council's arrogance. Commanders reported that battles felt less like wars and more like hunts, with the humans as the hunters and the council as the prey. In the Grand Chamber, the High Speaker's voice shook with fury as he demanded unity. He called humanity a virus spreading across the stars. But even in the Council's own chamber there were cracks. Some species muttered that perhaps humanity was not wrong to resist. Perhaps exile had been too cruel. Some leaders feared the humans not only because of their weapons but because of their ideas. The promise of freedom was more dangerous than any fleet, for it gave the weak a reason to rise. On Earth, leaders watched as the map of the galaxy changed. Glowing stars on their tables marked colonies now loyal to them. Worlds that once bowed to the Council now raised Earth's banner proudly. And every new ally meant more resources, more soldiers, more strength. The exile that was meant to break humanity had instead built its empire, piece by piece, world by world. In the training fields, soldiers of many species stood side by side with humans, former subjects of the Council now learning to fight under Earth's command. They drilled together, ate together, and whispered together of the day when the Empire would strike the Council at its heart. Their voices rose into chants, words simple yet powerful: Earth remembers, Earth leads, Earth protects. The sound carried across camps like thunder. The Council's fear grew into desperation. Spies reported colonies falling daily, fleets returning in ruins, whispers of entire systems changing sides without a single shot fired. They realized too late that exile had not ended humanity. It had freed it. The humans had no need for permission, no need for approval. They had built something larger than the Council itself, and now that empire was growing with every sunrise. And so the galaxy began to shift. What was once laughter at Earth's exile had turned into silence. What was once mockery had turned into dread. And what was once fear had turned into loyalty from the oppressed. The Council had cast out one world. But in doing so they had created something far greater. For now Earth was not just a planet. Earth was a banner, a promise, an empire of war rising from the ashes of exile. And the stars themselves seemed to tremble, knowing the storm was only beginning. The Council had grown desperate. The chamber once filled with laughter was now filled with fear. No one dared to joke about Earth anymore. Every councillor knew the truth but few wanted to speak it aloud. The humans were winning, colonies were falling like dominoes, trade routes were collapsing, and fleets that had once been proud symbols of galactic order were returning home as scattered wrecks or not returning at all. Voices rose demanding action, demanding unity, demanding that the Council crush humanity before it was too late. The High Speaker slammed his staff against the floor, declaring that a grand armada would be formed, the largest in centuries. Fleets from every species were ordered to join. Thousands of ships were gathered, their hulls shining in the void, their engines roaring like a storm. The Council believed that sheer size would end the human threat. But size did not mean strength, not against Earth. For while the Council gathered in arrogance, humanity had been studying them for decades. In underground halls, human strategists had dissected every battle the Council had ever fought, every weakness, every blind spot, every mistake. They knew the Council fleets moved slowly, bound by politics, bound by pride, and they knew how to strike where it hurt most. So when the Grand Armada moved into human space, ready to crush the empire of exile, they found not resistance in open battle but silence. The first days were eerie. The Armada advanced and found empty space, colonies abandoned, stations cold and silent, no fleets waiting. Commanders grew uneasy. But the High Speaker's orders were clear: advance, burn, and leave nothing alive. So they pressed forward. But then the shadows came, black warships sliding from the void, striking hard and vanishing before the Armada could respond. Cruisers shattered in minutes, frigates torn apart, their weapons useless against ships that seemed to move. Like predators, the humans never stayed to fight long. They attacked, destroyed, and vanished into the dark. Every night the council commanders held meetings, their maps covered in red where ships had been lost, their voices rising in panic. They had expected humans to fight like barbarians, head-on and reckless, but instead humanity fought with precision, with patience, striking supply lines, cutting communications. Isolating fleets, the Armada began to starve before it even reached Earth. Fuel ran low, rations dwindled, morale cracked. The galaxy had always believed humans were impulsive, but exile had taught them patience sharper than any blade. On one border system, the Council sent 3 fleets to corner a human stronghold, confident that their numbers would overwhelm. But when they arrived, the stronghold was empty, only beacons flickered in the dark, and when the fleets moved closer, hidden mines lit the void with fire. Human ships emerged from every angle, surrounding the Council fleets, tearing them apart piece by piece. Survivors screamed into their comms as black hulls sliced through them like wolves among sheep. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained. Only silence and the faint echo of a message repeating across every channel. Earth remembers. The galaxy trembled at the reports. Stories spread faster than the Council could control. Soldiers spoke of human ships that fought like ghosts, striking from nowhere, vanishing into shadows. Commanders whispered that every tactic they tried had already been predicted, that the humans knew their moves before they made them. Some began to fear that spies existed among them. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. Humanity had studied them for decades, learned them like prey, and now they were being hunted. In the Council chamber, cracks widened. Some species no longer wanted to send ships. They argued that their fleets were being wasted in a war they could not win. They whispered of negotiating with Earth, of bending the knee before it was too late. The High Speaker shouted them down, calling them cowards, but even his voice shook with fear, for he too knew the truth. Every battle fought only proved humanity stronger. Every attempt to crush them only spread their legend further. Meanwhile, on Earth, in the underground command centers, leaders watched the unfolding chaos with cold eyes. Maps glowed with red marks of destroyed fleets. Stars flickered with new banners raised in their favor. Their empire was expanding faster than even they had expected. Yet they did not celebrate. They had learned the hard way that arrogance was a poison. So they moved carefully, step by step, strike by strike. Each victory another stone laid in the foundation of an empire that could not be shaken. In training camps across newly allied worlds, soldiers of many species trained under human officers. They learned new tactics, new strategies. They learned discipline that the Council had never taught them, and they grew loyal to Earth, for they saw strength, they saw purpose, and they saw protection. Whispers turned into chants in every camp, chants that echoed through corridors and across parade grounds. Earth protects, Earth avenges, Earth remembers. The sound was like thunder, spreading through the galaxy faster than fear. The Council tried one last desperate act, sending their armada to attack the colonies that had sworn loyalty to Earth. But again, humanity was ready. They struck with precision, cutting the Council's forces into fragments. Their fleets moved like blades through the darkness, the black hulls shining with fire, and once again the Council's pride was torn apart. More colonies defected, more voices turned to Earth. The Grand Armada that was meant to end humanity had become the symbol of the Council's greatest weakness. And so the War of Reckoning had truly begun. The galaxy could no longer deny it. The humans were not just returning, they were remaking the stars. Every Council defeat was a human victory. Every world lost to the Council was another world raised under Earth's banner. The Empire of Exile was now an empire of war, and though the Council still stood, its foundation was breaking, its voice shaking, its fleets crumbling. The day was coming when the humans would not just strike from the shadows. They would march openly, and when that day came, the galaxy would see the true cost of casting Earth aside. The Council had no choice left. Their fleets were shattered piece by piece. Their colonies were slipping away, and their enemies were no longer whispers in the dark but banners raised high under Earth's star. In the Grand Chamber the voices of councillors were filled with panic. Fear had eaten away at their pride. Some begged for peace, others demanded surrender. But the High Speaker slammed his staff and shouted that surrender to humans would mean the end of their order forever. And so a desperate plan was made. All that remained of the Council's fleets would be gathered into one force. Every ship from every loyal species. A war host greater than any seen in centuries. Tens of thousands of ships, carriers, destroyers, cruisers, all forged into one armada. They called it the Final Reckoning Fleet, and they sent it to end Earth. The galaxy watched as the Armada moved through the stars, its engines like suns, its weapons glowing in the dark. The Council broadcast the sight across every world, hoping to restore confidence, showing the people their strength, promising that humanity would be crushed. On Earth the broadcasts were seen as well. But the human leaders did not tremble. In their hidden command centers they studied the Armada, maps glowing with red markers, their eyes calm, their voices steady. They had expected this, they had planned for this. Exile had not been wasted on fear. It had been spent preparing for this very moment. When the Final Reckoning Fleet entered human space, silence greeted them again, no defenses, no fleets waiting, only empty stars. Commanders grew uneasy. They remembered how silence before had meant death. But orders were clear: advance, burn, destroy, and then the first strike came, not from the front but from the shadows behind. Human ships slid out of the void, weapons tearing through the rear lines of the Armada. Dozens of Council ships fell before they could even raise shields. Panic spread, formations broke, orders shouted across comms turned into chaos. But this time the humans did not vanish after the strike. This time they stayed, and from every angle the black warships appeared. Fleets upon fleets, larger than the Council had ever imagined. Carriers releasing swarms of fighters, cruisers blasting through enemy lines, battleships thundering with weapons that cut through shields like paper. The Council realized in horror that the single warship they had seen before was only the beginning. The true fleet of Earth had been hidden until now, and it was vast. The battle raged for hours. The Council Armada fought with desperation. Their numbers enormous, their firepower overwhelming. But the humans fought like predators. Their fleets moved in perfect coordination, striking weak points, cutting off reinforcements, isolating sections of the Armada and destroying them one by one. Every Council tactic met with a counter. Every maneuver predicted. Exile had taught humanity patience. But it had also given them mastery, and now it showed in every strike. On the bridges of Council ships, commanders screamed as black hulls tore through their lines. Crews panicked as messages of destruction flooded in. System after system reporting defeat. Entire squadrons wiped out in minutes, morale collapsed, and soldiers began to whisper the words they had heard too many times before: Earth remembers. The phrase spread like poison, eating away at their will to fight. Some ships even surrendered mid-battle, broadcasting their willingness to join humanity rather than die for a Council that had already failed them. Above one world near the battlefront, the Council tried to regroup, forming their largest carriers into a defensive wall. But the humans came like a storm, bombers streaking through gaps, fighters swarming like a tide, battleships pounding the carriers until their hulls cracked and their engines went silent. The wall collapsed, and with it the last hope of order. Humanity's fleets surged forward, wave after wave until the stars themselves seemed to burn with their fire. The High Speaker, watching from a distant command ship, could only stare in disbelief, his voice shaking as he demanded that the Armada fight harder. But no one listened. The Council had ruled the galaxy for centuries, and yet in a single generation Exile had turned humanity into something greater than rulers, into conquerors. The Speaker realized too late that the laughter they once gave the humans had been the death knell of their own order. Back on Earth, in the hidden command halls, the leaders received report after report of victories, their faces still calm, their voices still steady. They gave no speeches of arrogance. They simply issued the next orders: push forward, secure the systems, bring the colonies under the banner. The Empire of War was no longer just rising. It was marching openly, its fleets flooding into the galaxy, every battle another nail in the coffin of the Council. In the camps of allied colonies, soldiers of many species cheered as news of the battles reached them. They chanted louder, their voices shaking the ground: Earth protects, Earth leads, Earth remembers. They were no longer just following humans. They were becoming part of something greater, a union born not of diplomacy but of struggle, forged not by treaties but by fire. The battle of the Final Reckoning Fleet would be remembered for centuries. The day when the Council threw everything it had into the void, and the day when everything broke, when the stars lit with fire and humanity stood unbroken. An empire born in exile now proving its strength before all. And as the wreckage of thousands of Council ships drifted silently in the dark, one truth echoed across the galaxy: humanity had not just returned. Humanity had claimed its place, and the Council was no longer the master of the stars. And so the War of Reckoning turned into something more. It was no longer just about survival. no longer just about vengeance. It was about destiny. The humans were no longer fighting to be heard. They were fighting to rule, and the galaxy trembled as it realized that the Empire of Earth was not coming. It was already here. The stars burned with the wreckage of the Council's grand fleet. Tens of thousands of ships reduced to drifting husks, their twisted hulls glimmering in the void like broken bones. Across the galaxy the silence was louder than any victory speech. The Council had promised the people that the humans would be crushed. Yet the Council's greatest armada had been destroyed, the illusion of their power shattered. Worlds that once bowed in fear now lifted their heads, and in the empty places of the galaxy where the Council's voice no longer reached, another banner was already rising. On Earth, in the underground halls of command, leaders gathered around the glowing map of the stars. Red markers of destroyed Council fleets flickered one after another until whole regions were clear. Blue markers of colonies that had sworn loyalty to Earth spread across the galaxy like a storm. Silence filled the room as they realized what had been achieved. Not just survival, not just revenge, but victory on a scale once unthinkable. Earth was no longer the outcast. Earth was now the center of a growing empire. An empire born in shadows and tempered in war. The Council chamber was a ruin of its former self. Councillors shouted at each other, their voices filled with fear and betrayal. Some demanded peace talks, others demanded escape to hidden worlds. The High Speaker's voice was hollow, for even he knew the truth. The Council was finished, their fleets gone, their colonies lost, their allies defecting. There was no empire left to command, only fragments and fear, for the first time in centuries. The galaxy no longer looked to the Council for guidance, it looked to Earth. On colony after colony, black warships appeared not as conquerors but as rulers. Their soldiers stepped onto soil carrying supplies as much as weapons, and the people who once feared humanity now cheered them. For Earth did not rule with chains but with promise. They promised protection against the chaos the Council had left. They promised freedom to worlds long ignored, and above all they promised strength. Banners bearing the single star of Earth were raised across cities, on space stations. And even in the halls where the Council once ruled, the Empire of Earth had spread not just through war but through loyalty. In training camps the chants grew louder, voices of humans and aliens together, voices shouting the same words in 100 languages. Earth protects, Earth leads, Earth remembers. It was no longer just a human cry. It was the anthem of an empire. Soldiers from dozens of worlds fought side by side, their loyalty not to their old rulers but to Earth, and in their eyes burned the same fire, the fire of those who had been cast aside but now stood unbroken. The Council spies reported that some worlds surrendered without a single shot, their leaders broadcasting messages of allegiance to Earth. Some even begged for protection, for they had seen what humanity had done to the Armada, and they knew resistance was hopeless. What began as whispers of rebellion had turned into a flood of loyalty. Humanity's empire was not just taken by force, it was chosen, and that choice spread faster than any fleet. But Earth did not forget the humiliation of exile. The leaders of humanity made it clear that the Council's betrayal would never be forgiven. The old order would never rise again. In the ruins of the Council chamber, human envoys walked for the first time since their exile, not as beggars but as rulers. Their boots echoed across the marble floor, and where once laughter had mocked them, now silence bowed before them. The High Speaker tried to speak, tried to plead, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of soldiers marching. The Council's age had ended. The galaxy trembled under the new reality. Earth was no longer one world struggling to survive. It was the core of an empire spanning stars. An empire built on discipline, sacrifice, and fury. The humans had taken exile and turned it into steel, turned silence into strategy, turned betrayal into destiny. No species could ignore it, no fleet could deny it, and no world could escape it. The Empire of Earth was the new order. Yet the leaders of humanity knew this was only the beginning. In the great shipyards beneath oceans, new fleets were still being built, larger, stronger, hungrier. They knew the galaxy would test them again. Rivals would rise, rebels would emerge. But they were ready, for exile had taught them that survival was never given. It was taken, and now they had taken more than survival, they had taken the stars. And so the story ended where it began, in silence, but not the silence of exile. It was the silence of respect, of fear, of acknowledgement. No one laughed at Earth anymore, no one mocked humanity. In the halls of power across the galaxy, in the markets of distant colonies, in the homes of farmers and miners, one truth was spoken: Earth had returned, and it had returned not with pleas but with an empire of war. The council had exiled them believing they would vanish, but instead they had created their own downfall. And as the banners of Earth spread across the stars, as the black warships patrolled the void, as new worlds swore allegiance, one phrase echoed everywhere, in whispers, in chants, in songs, in the hearts of millions who now lived under the new empire: Earth remembers, and the galaxy would never forget.